Okay, so we're back to Cracks in Postmodernity with David Odyssey, who wrote a really incredible article for the Iffy about none other than Britney Spears. So before we jump into the article, David, tell us a little bit about your background.
Delighted to be here, long time listener. I am raised in Texas. I think I live in New York presently. Right now, we're talking from Tel Aviv.
Mhm.
Um, I have been writing since I was 17 for, I started writing for a queer publication in Texas, an LGBTQ publication in Texas about pop culture. And that was back when you would get labels would send press CDs to listen to and
Mhm.
then review. So I got to review a lot of really lowbrow, bad stuff and a lot of good stuff, but like I started in that little interregnum between Madonna's Confessions on a Dance Floor and Lady Gaga's debut.
Oh
So
wow,
there
what a
was just a
time.
lot of like strange Queen Latifah comebacks and
Oh
like
yeah, I
Sierra
remember that.
vehicles. It was yeah, and you know Kelly Rowland was having her big solo debut. So
Yep.
that's how I started, and I've written about culture pretty much consistently since then. And I was an editor at Time Out New York, where I got to write about comedy, things to do, LGBT stuff, and I'm currently a columnist at Nylon, where I write about astrology and culture.
Cool. So you've been a little bit all over the place, but all having to do with pop culture, which we love.
Sure.
So the Iffy. So I had Brennan on, who's the editor of the Iffy, a couple months ago. But no, so I found your article, and as I was saying before, I just like really hit the nail on the head with Britney. Like it really, you articulated a lot of things that I was feeling, but wasn't really sure how to put to words. So I just want to start reading from the first paragraph because I want people to hear this. So, okay, so you have to understand that standom isn't a thing. It hasn't ever been. Stands are by and large a pack of dilettantes. They just want to have something to say and something to represent in an endless media cycle of which we're all suddenly active commentators. Um, but they're really just consumers, as bourgeois as the rest of us. Anyone can call themselves Diz nerds on their Grinder profiles or draft an erudite tweet about Taylor Swift. But where's the devotion? Fans are something else. They don't want an identity or a hobby. They want God. And then you get into Britney. I'm really curious how you kind of construe this idea of the pop star, particularly Britney, as some kind of like spiritual deific entity. Like, how did you arrive at that understanding?
You and I, first of all, I want to say that you and I think we're the same age. I'm 32.
I'm
Um,
almost 30, so close.
okay, sorry. But you and I are around the same age, and we came of age at this very um, interesting nexus where the consumerist machine being aimed at teens was kind of at its apex, but it hadn't devolved into this kind of Disney Channel gulag factory farm that we have now, where
Mhm.
the talent of the star is kind of irrelevant and they're going to move on to something else. Britney Spears is really a product of the previous century where you did have to have a certain amount of star power for the rest of the machine to roll. So we're talking about basically Michael Jackson and then straight to Britney Spears. You know,
Mhm.
it's that level.
Yeah.
So Britney Spears, to me, there's just I, I love Ariana Grande. I think she's incredible. But there's something about Britney Spears where if you were a child and you heard her, I was 8 when when she first came out with "Hit Me Baby One More Time."
Mhm.
It's an epochal moment in your development,
Yeah.
and it's this moment of this is my generation's culture. This belongs to me now.
Mhm.
And because Britney Spears is so talented and because she's so sexual, she's a little bit more than the Spice Girls or the Backstreet Boys. She's everything. Um, she's a complete object. If she is going to be an object who's sold, she is a complete, perfect object in every way. So there's just something about her that felt really big and epochal and generation defining.
Yeah, and you say so Britney landed like Buddha Moses Superman figure, a being perfected, one who would lead the battle for an endangered, imagined paradise girlhood. So I think this taps into this kind of eternal archetype of the allure, the mysticism of the feminine, but like the youthful feminine, the youthful girl, which
You're
has
right. I think
this,
there's a Mary Magdalene element there because,
yeah.
the other thing is, I think for someone like Taylor Swift, who's become popular during this like neoliberal girl boss feminist boom, that's great. Britney Spears really exploded, and then George Bush became president, and then 9/11, and then the world turned on her, and she became a bad girl. So there's a lot more there of this sort of like Britney Spears is right there at the death of girl power. The girl power movement we see go down with her, and she is this kind of like last messianic figure of it. So
Mhm.
with her, the rise and the fall to me are what make her such a god.
Yeah, and the way that you said it, like it made me think a lot about the way Palia writes about, like the archetype of the sacred feminine, the femme fatale, which, was one of Britney's album titles. But you see that she's not selling this neoliberal feminist type of narrative. She's like, a truly sexual woman, a sexual girl, mind you, which
Yeah.
already is kind of controversial. But again, like that sex power of the woman has it's alluring. Like it points to something beyond this material level. It points to something metaphysical, which I think is part of why she becomes this like religious figure in a way, the spiritual figure, right?
Yeah, first of all, you're the one who got me obsessed with Camille Paglia, and like I listened to one of your episodes, and then I got her book from the library, and I read Sexual Persona, and then I bought it. So thank you.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think the what's really at stake with Britney Spears is sex and consumerism, which is so archetypal of. Yes, so Ariana Grande, when she releases Dangerous Woman, it's a great album and like it is quote unquote sexy, but Britney Spears is there is something going on of I am a pure object of consumption. I am
Mhm.
on, the Pepsi Super Bowl commercial, and now I'm going to unleash my sexuality in a way that it can't be bottled and contained, a la the Spice Girls, etc. And even like with Whitney Houston, who had to play straight. Britney Spears unleashes this thing, and it is very volcanic and chthonian and scorpionic, which is like, you wanted to pay for sexuality, I'm going to grant your wish, and here are the consequences, which is, yes, it's everything you just said with Palia. So it's much more, it's really dangerous in that way.
Yeah, and it's affirming that there is such a thing as nature as opposed to, I don't know, like Palia juxtaposes this pagan understanding of nature, even the Judeo-Christian one, with again this like very enlightenment Rousseauist understanding of like, everything's a tabula rasa, everything's socially constructive. But no, like Britney is like it's this the pure sex power of the woman, which may not be politically correct, but again, it doesn't fail. Like she continues to attract people, even if it's not, right or,
Exactly, exactly. And with Christina Aguilera, it's interesting they're both Sagittariuses and they both, debuted at the same time. Christina Aguilera is really such a voice and she's so
Mhm.
talented. And yes, Christina Aguilera went through her sleaze era, which is so iconic, and I love the Dirty video. The thing with Christina Aguilera, I think because she's such a voice and there's a lot of strange race stuff that happened around her
Yes.
imaging, it's not as cohesive. Britney Spears, there's some sort of an authority there. And, I'm in Tel Aviv and they have MTV Europe here. And MTV Europe, it's only music videos. That's
Mhm.
all day. And Oops, I Did It Again came on today while I was
Really.
vacuuming. And there's just, it all kind of comes together there. And then when she decided, not when she decided, when she was branded as a villain, and when she started to become, this great provocateur, she's able to take that consistency through the dancing, the music, all of it, to keep hitting the nail on the head in a way that really frightened and terrified people. So yeah, it's really, it's all centralized in her.
Yeah, but I feel like with Christina, the dirty phase was very forced. I feel like it was
Yeah,
like she just made such a thing out of it. Whereas for Britney, it was just like she just did it and it was what it was. But also with
exactly.
the voice thing, yeah, Christina forces the voice. It's like, okay, we understand you have a powerful voice and you're drawing from the Black spiritual tradition, but like you have no control over it. You just keep doing it to prove that you have this voice. Whereas Britney, like, Britney's just a persona. Like, it's not her voice. The dancing's okay, but she doesn't, like, she's not a musician per se. She's just this public figure. And that's why it's so, I think it's like it's the artifice of it all that makes it so fascinating. Whereas Christina, like, okay, we know that you can sing and maybe you can write some songs. Cool, but there's nothing
Exactly.
that exceptional about that.
There's something about her, and I love Madonna. Madonna goes through all sorts of different artistic phases and kind of characters, but she to me is still an artist first.
Hmm.
Britney Spears is very much like debuting in this Josie and the Pussycats era of like, I know I'm an object, this is my persona, but also I've got everything it takes to keep this train rolling. So it's yeah, you're right. She's a persona first that's then supported by talent. And the
Hmm.
persona is bigger than life. The
Yes.
persona is threatening and um, incandescent and alluring and exciting.
And the fact that it's so artificial, you could say, like, I think this is why it speaks so much or spoke so much to our generation that, like, the fact that consumerism can produce a figure like this, like it really
Exactly.
speaks to our times. But I want to hear more what you have to say about the spiritual void that you think she filled. Like, what did you see in our generation that was kind of longing for this type of deific figure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there was a lot of excitement around the girl power era. And then we see that there's a huge, we enter into a huge backlash decade with the 2000s
Mhm.
where it all kind of comes crashing down and things become hyper masculinized and there's the emo movement, but um, it becomes a really joyless, colorless time. Britney Spears represents this kind of pure personification of girl power that gets ramped up a little to a higher form of agency and danger and power, like the actual power of it. The Spice Girls I love, but Britney Spears, there's really a deeper embodiment.
Mhm.
So I think for gay boys, and I also think for girls, she's this thing that we could be obsessed with um, who is so her videos are so much about this power she has, and because her dancing is so perfect, Oops, I Did It Again, we see her like, shutting down this astronaut who brings her the diamond from
Yeah.
Titanic, and she's not even interested. There is, it's this sense of we're this generation who are marketed to because um, corporate America understood that tweens and teens had their parents' money and could spend it. Britney
Mhm.
Spears is saying like, I get that, but I'm actually going to sell you an authentic image of power that you can not aspire to, but truly worship.
Yeah.
Because someone like Whitney Houston or Celine Dion, you love the music, but I don't think they have this figure of perfection. And
Mhm.
Britney Spears does embody this ideal that is whole and untouchable.
Yeah.
And I think that's what is so that's what was so intoxicating. I don't know if that touches on it. I think there's probably more.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. But then you talk a lot about all the fans that start the hashtag Free Britney campaign and then going to protest. what do you see in this? The fact that like fans will go so far as to fly out to wherever to protest for her. Like, what do you see happening there?
This gave me a huge amount of hope because a lot of what I read about in the piece is how Britney Spears harkens back to this time of like you would have a Britney poster above your bedroom ceiling. You would have all of her albums, you'd have all the merchandise. Like there was this real devotion that I also find very spiritual of like because you and I come from this 90s consumerist time, like that is the religion is like
Yeah.
buying images and idols of this messianic figure. So there's this deep devotion to her. And a lot of what I complain about in the article is this very surface fandom that I talk about like on Grinder, gays can just say that they're like a Marvel nerd, and it's like,
Yeah.
are you? Like, what does that mean? Okay, I can go for hours about that. Britney, her fans, there's this sense of like, I have been obsessed with you from the moment I heard you. I have all your tapes. I'm devoted to you. And now I'm going to prove it, not just by consuming you, but by like getting involved in the stakes of your life, which are, it's very bizarre and violating that they did that. But it's also kind of hopeful because it's saying, all right, these people aren't just consumers. They want to ensure some
Hmm.
vitality and joy for this person, and they want to speak for her freedom. So it is very exciting because it's showing some sort of a dialogue or a two-way exchange with fandom.
Yeah, and I was also going to ask you because recently she's posted some, when she does these weird shit posts on
Oh
Instagram,
yeah.
and it's like, this incoherent blob of text. But several times she's referenced something about converting to Catholicism, which like a lot of people started talking about, and I tried to figure out. I mean, I've seen several people like her have these kinds of religious conversions. Like you see Lindsay becoming Muslim. And mind you, like most of these pop stars grew up evangelical or some type of religious. But what's interesting to me is that like with what you're saying about the devotion of the fans, like when I was growing up, I couldn't have articulated this at that age, but like I definitely felt this spiritual void. And for me, these pop stars definitely filled it in. So again, it wasn't merely a consumerist experience. Like I wanted to give my life to something. I wanted to be part of something.
Yes.
And I found eventually, like after getting more involved in like institutional religion, I found that like devotion to the saints kind of filled that void in a
Yeah.
similar way that the celebrities did. So like, you can buy a poster of Britney and then you can buy a statue or a painting of a saint and you can go on a pilgrimage to see their relics. You go,
Yeah.
protesting for Britney. Like it's interesting how in our consumerist age, these very physical manifestations of spiritual religious devotion, you know, I think something about the consumerist ethos makes you want to have that very physical, very tactile experience of spirituality, whether it's through worship of a celebrity or of some actual religious figure. So I don't know. I just wonder, like, when she says, like, "Oh, I'm converting to Catholicism," it's like, I mean, it sounds crazy, but there is a weird convergence. I don't know what you thought when you saw that
Well,
come.
first, as an aside, what you're really making me think about too is I think her womanness, back to Palia, like because Britney Spears is so embodied woman, it brings in a lot more to me spiritual fervor in that she has this Lilith incarnate Aphrodite sexuality that I think
Mhm.
it's a more immediate experience than someone like Taylor Swift, who I'm kind of like, you are girl playing woman, and I'm not having you are not Michelle Pfeiffer, you are not Cher, you are not that thing, that sort of a diva. So I just want to say that. And
Mhm.
secondly, I mean, the best part about, not the best part, and I'm not workshopping her very harrowing court testimony, but the part that really like got me was when she says that she doesn't believe in therapy, she just takes it up to God, because she is who is Britney Spears going to talk to that's going to have any
Yeah.
objectivity about her? She's too big. So of course she has to take it straight up to God. So yeah, I think it's really interesting that she would go to Catholicism. And I think that Catholicism, for someone like her, I think that the rigidity of Catholicism would give her some really useful friction. I don't think
Interesting.
Britney Spears belongs. Britney Spears is like a Shirley Temple type, or,
Hmm.
in that she like has worked since she was a child and was exploited by her family. So I don't really see her like going to this like very soft, self-indulgent wellness movement. She's like a country Christian who's worked her whole life. So I think Catholicism would be really great for her because there's challenge and friction and kind of hardness that I would see being really alluring to someone like her.
But also like the appreciation of the sacred feminine, which you don't have in like
That's
evangelical
the problem.
Christianity. Like you have Mary and Mary Magdalene, and there's definitely
That's
something there.
I agree. And the problem with things the way they are now is not the problem with things the way they are now. I just think the current culture has neutered the sacred feminine.
Mhm.
Um, and Palia did a great piece on this, I think, for the Hollywood Reporter recently
Mhm.
about how like there are no women screen sirens anymore. There are only
Mhm.
trans women who play screens who can do that, like India Moore on Pose, because it's been so thoroughly neutered. And I think Britney Spears, and this is why Madonna will always come back. Madonna figured out how to tap into that Catholic womanhood,
Mhm.
um, which it's already on its way back now. Like now that we're entering another backlash decade, it's already coming back. So yeah, I think the Catholicism is brilliant.
So then I have a question more general about fandoms. Like you highlight how
Oof.
for Britney, like it's a lot of girls and gays who are attracted to that kind of figure. And like I think if you look at most straight men, like there's definitely some sense of devotion to like sports figures or even or you mentioned Eminem and like other kinds of figures like that. But do you think the way the devotion to these figures manifests is different for these different types of gender groups or whatever?
I have to say yes. Um, there's of course the famous part in the Fran Lebowitz public speaking documentary where she talks about how AIDS wiped out this great critical audience.
Mhm.
She's taught, when you go to a Charlie XCX concert or a Rina Sawayama concert, those gays know every song
Mhm.
and can talk about it. And whether the album is good or bad, they'll be loyal, but there is a really big critical discourse happening. So I just think it's a little bit different than I think that there's a okay, for instance, I'm in Tel Aviv right now. Maroon 5 came. The tour sold out. They added a second night. It sold
Wow.
out. They added a third night. This is from Maroon 5, who,
Huh.
like, show me someone who's, like, on their hands and knees ripping out their hair for Maroon 5. You know what I mean?
That's pretty hard.
There's something else that happens, though, when I went to a Caroline Polachek concert or, that sort of a thing.
Mhm.
Or when I went to Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill 25th anniversary, and that was all about these women who were in it.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit more, there is this sense of like, this voice, this color, and this expression is all I have, and I'm going to really honor it and worship it and take it so seriously.
Mhm.
It's so devoted, which is what shocked me when Taylor Swift has become so big in the gay community, because I see her as so broad that it's shocking to me that there's that same level of like, I need to pick apart every lyric and this person is saving my life. I just don't see that. I don't get that, but it's clearly there.
Yeah. So now that you bring up other artists, I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts because, like, you said with Celine and Whitney, what the big draw is the voice, the songs, not as much, the artifice, the persona, which is, it makes sense. Yeah, with Taylor, I've never been drawn to her. I mean, I don't see what the attraction is at all. She's
Me
seems
neither.
vapid. Yeah, I mean, I in the beginning I heard some people say she was actually good at songwriting. I don't know. I've never paid attention.
Okay.
More interested in what you would have to say about Ariana because I think she's fascinating. I don't like. I don't think she's would ever be at the caliber of a Britney, but like I think she's fascinating to analyze because she's really a sign of the time. So I don't know. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I'm also she's a tricky one because I love her. She's great. Um, and I think she's very smart and playful, and she's quite cunning, and which I love all of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's, and by the way, Britney Spears comes from the Mickey Mouse Club, so I'm not trying to say that Britney Spears was this like original event and she's not out of some machine. There's something about Ariana that she seems she emerges out of the Disney Channel industrial complex,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a little bit girl world. And when I say girl world, again, I love girl power and Britney Spears is part of girl power. So I'm not against that, but she's a little bit, there's always going to be something to me that's a little less like um, sexual woman who threatens the matrix and a little bit more like very smart, self aware product. Britney Spears to me really like if you were around in 2002, Britney Spears was a threat to the entire Bush era paradigm. Ariana Grande to me, I think, is really good at going with the current,
Mm-hmm.
um, and she's less indelible to me because she's less iconoclastic.
Why do you say that about Britney and the Bush era?
So Britney Spears is the she is the final perfect creation of girl power. We have like Spice Girls, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Xena Warrior Princess, Britney Spears comes.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after, Britney Spears is very sexual, more than before. And then shortly after, we plunge straight into the 2000s backlash era, where we're seeing this sudden rise of like wife swap and, hyperconservatism. And, there's a lot of focus on pregnancy and motherhood, and girl power really just vanishes.
Mm-hmm.
Britney Spears goes on track. She stays on course. She's so popular that she doesn't really go down. And now her actions start to become threatening, and she's gone too far. She's messy. She starts to bite back a little bit. The videos are starting to be deemed like way too controversial. All of these things that were tongue in cheek are now becoming really like considered. She's gone too far, and you just see that as someone like Jessica Simpson is debuting, like as we're seeing the kind of boring pop stars of the 2000s, Britney Spears is like, I'm going on this ride. What do you mean girl power's over? I'm going to keep going. Like, there's just something about her that's really her marriage, the fact that she doesn't really care about being a virgin anymore, all the shit she gets down into, all the controversy. It's right before Paris Hilton emerges, and Paris Hilton is really wielding it differently, but Britney Spears is the one who's kind of like rattling at the cage, it feels like.
Yeah. Because with Ariana, first, I think there's something to be said about the difference between these Disney stars and the Nickelodeon stars, because there's something missing from the Nickelodeon stars.
Mm,
But also, I mean, Ariana's a singer coming from the tradition of Mariah and Whitney and Celine.
yeah.
Um, but in terms of her image, I find it to be really vapid, boring. I mean, she like plays up the girl power, the dangerous woman, but I don't see her tapping into any like archetype of the sacred feminine. Like there's nothing truly womanly about her. And I think I mean, I don't want to say it like that, but I just feel like she's not connected to any sense of the eternal archetype of the woman. Um,
You know who, if we want to talk about, a really great precedent for an antecedent for Britney Spears is Selena Quintanilla.
Yeah.
Selena,
That's a good
the
point.
queen of Chicano, you know, you will see until you and I are dead, there will be, you will see people wearing Selena t-shirts
Yes.
who will in a Catholic way, like will light a candle for her. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Selena, who really had a brief time, did really embody some sort of a raw ethnic, cultural
Mhm.
sexuality that spiritually you immediately understand. And I think Madonna has gone through phases of that too, and
Yeah.
Britney too. And I agree with you. Ariana, I think, has everything, but I think the she's not necessarily embodying a larger force, you know?
Yeah.
I completely agree with you.
I see her as like the embodiment of the internet era because she's just like she is Instagram Barbie. Like she is like all the hashtags, all the filters. Which is like
Yes.
it's cute, it's hype, but there's no depth. Again, not tapping into any larger historical kind of reality. Um, but also what I find most fascinating is that like she'll post about the social issue du jour, but she plays this game with cultural appropriation, which I think is kind of funny because like she's Italian American. Like sometimes she'll play it up, sometimes she'll talk about like, I'm an Italian girl, not in the way Madonna did. But then, like she is using, a kind of black singing style. She uses trap and R&B in her songs.
And
Um,
Latina, certainly. Like
yeah,
she
like
plays a lot of Latina stuff too.
she does that. She does the Asian fishing with the eyes. And it's for me, it's like she'll say how woke she is and she'll, post all the hashtag pride and Black Lives Matter stuff. But then it's like she'll appropriate these cultures and she'll laugh at you because she's like, well, I'm gonna do it because I can, and what are you gonna do? Like you can, Vulture can write an article condemning me, but how are you gonna stop me? You can't stop me. Like I am Ariana.
Yes. And there's been some of that with Selena Gomez too. Yeah, it doesn't actually, I don't know. With someone like Britney Spears or Alanis Morissette, there's this thing of like, I can see how in your music and your image and your persona, this is what you represent and this is what you threaten. You know, this is the thing you're doing and with Madonna too. This is the thing you're doing that's pissing people off. With Ariana, it's this collage of cultural cultural aesthetics
Mm-hmm.
that she's kind of seeping through and blurring through, and it can be offensive, but frankly, like none of it is even that intrinsic to who she is. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's ever going to be like truly controversial, because like Britney Spears is sex. This is always going to be a problem. Madonna is like religious imagery that gets fucked up. That's always going to be a problem. Ariana, it's what you said. It's very du jour. It's like she's doing trap now. Okay, she's singing in Spanish now. Like she's always going through a different phase, but it's not. I don't really know what her intrinsic like what the element is that she embodies that is
I
going
don't
to
think there's
be
any intrinsic.
right.
I think that's why she's so empty. But I don't know. Like I just think that her switching between these cultures, like this is the kind of globalist fluidity of the internet age. Like, yes, on the surface, you'll promote all the issues du jour, but in reality, like it's always liquid, it's always changing. There's no sense of fixity in a particular tradition or an ideal. Um, so I don't know. I think she really represents our age.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah.
Um, And you know what's interesting? I don't know why this is popping into my head, and this is a whole nother conversation, but like there was this interesting period when Lena Dunham and Taylor Swift were friends, and Lena Dunham was reportedly like teaching Taylor Swift about feminism. And what's interesting is that Lena Dunham went down, and Lena Dunham to me is really a clear I understand what she represents. I understand what her art did, and I really understand why it pissed people off and why it threatened people and why they had to kind of take her down. Taylor Swift, you look at her quote unquote feminism, and it's like, okay, I don't really know what this is about. You don't know what this is about either, clearly. So, yeah, Taylor Swift is never going to be exciting or dangerous to me. And it shocks me when people are mesmerized by her every move. And I've had people say to me, like, well, you know, she might be closeted. You know, that's what she's hinting at the lyrics. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, what kind of, even if she came out as a lesbian tomorrow, like, she wouldn't be she wouldn't be threatening or
Yeah.
dangerous. You know, she wouldn't be fitting any archetype. So,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Mm. Let's take it back a little bit to Mariah. What are your
Mm.
initial thoughts on Mariah?
See, Mariah to me is a classic, a classic, a real classic diva. Like
Mhm.
she really is of a different era.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't necessarily connect with her the same way that I would with like a Cher or a Barbara Streisand,
Okay.
but Mariah is, yeah, I think she's the real deal. I think she is so outrageous um, that she's so outrageous in everything she says that she's kind of more of a comic character to me. I mean, obviously, I love her music and the talent, but like her beefs are so ridiculous and silly that they're their own form of entertainment, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think she embodies a lot of important archetypes because first, like she draws a lot on the old Hollywood divas, specifically Marilyn
Right.
Monroe. She's taking from the Black spiritual tradition, which she grew up in. Also, the more modern, like hip hop kind of, street tradition. But then camp, like she is, I mean, true embodiment of the camp diva, like the way that she starts all this beef and the way that she's over the top on purpose. She knows she's ridiculous. Like all put together, I think it's a fascinating combination.
I agree. You know, she's an Aries similar to Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, and there's something there in that way. And sh she is a real showgirl.
Mhm.
You know, when you look at Mariah Carey, she's a show pony and she is going to be an entertainer her whole life. There are some of the other girls where I'm like, you are a celebrity. And you're a performer, but you're really a celebrity. Mariah, I'm not saying she's an artist. First, I'm saying she's like a showgirl, and and she's in that world of, you know, of course she had a feud with Aretha Franklin. Like that's her milieu, and it is there's something a little bit more endearing about that to me than maybe a Disney Channel star who's then a singer and then an actress. Like Mariah is just kind of tied to this rocket, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people hate her. I think part of it is like the campy thing, 'cause like they find it to be insufferable. But I always remind people, like, even if you hate the persona, like the woman's actually talented because she can sing and she also writes her own songs. And the lyrics are
And her
very
lyrics.
interesting. They're
Yeah.
like the like Hero and all those, like the Diane Warren, like those are stupid. I don't care for those. But like the real album cuts that she writes are like very profound, like the way she plays with words, and people don't seem to pick up on that.
I mean, you know, you'll always be a part of me. I'm part of you indefinitely. It's like, where would you
Mhm.
even think
Yeah,
of that? But there's something about her tawdriness that I find really endearing, and I also find really archetypal, which is like there is this kind of it's very Italian to me, but there's like this hoochie, not hoochie, but this very like um, kind of cheapness to her aesthetic that is
Mhm.
very relatable, and I think all sorts of people can get behind that. And there's something with the internet girls. I really like what you're saying about the internet era. There's a little bit of a superiority to the internet girls, and there's a little bit of a like, I'm just trying this look on, but it's a joke, and I'm kind of like winking about it as I
Yeah.
appropriate it. With Mariah, there's like an authentic tackiness that
Mhm.
is really that is beautiful, and I think a little bit more indelible because it's like this is real, you know?
Yeah, I think she's the campiest of these divas. Like
Yeah,
she's most conscious of it. But
exactly.
yeah, before we go back to Britney, last question about Beyonce versus Rihanna, because this is something I've been observing. Our generation, our age group, majority of people favor Beyonce. They see her to be more interesting, more talented, more relatable. Younger people, maybe 10 or 15 years younger, seem to agree that Rihanna is much more interesting. I have very little interest in Rihanna. I mean, I think, yeah, like
Interesting.
there are certain archetypes, certain imagery that she uses that are, yeah, like, interesting in a way, but like the woman herself, I don't relate. But I want to hear what you have to say about it.
That's so interesting. I think I'm the inverse. I mean, we're looking, of course, at Beyonce Virgo, Rihanna Pisces, the age-old battle, but listen, I'm from Houston. I grew up on Destiny's Child. I
Mhm.
love all of it, but Beyonce is a sphinx to me. And
Mhm.
especially with the last 10 years of music, she's really very sharply aligned with a very powerful revolutionary feminism, but it puts her at such a level that she is no longer human and she is fully an archetype. Like she really is just a model. Rihanna to me, there's a messiness there and there's a bit more of an attitude there. And when Rihanna went public about the abuse she suffered from Chris Brown, and then got back with Chris Brown, there was a lot of humanity there where you understood, like, oh, this isn't just a show. She's kind of figuring shit out. And I think as she's become this mogul, I there's something a little bit relatable about her, which is that she has a bit of a flair and a bit of a joy. Um, Beyonce is perfect. She is absolute perfection, and I often find I'm missing the camp aspect. Like
Okay.
Beyonce and her fandom, unless you talk about Destiny's Child, which I can for hours, the
Mhm.
camp is gone.
Yeah.
It is gone. It is We are in a very self-serious era, which is okay, but we are in an era of Beyonce has released an album, now it's time for the Jezebel articles. And
Mhm.
that's just the world we live in, which is fine. I It's harder for me to access that.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I mean, my take on it, first on the musical level, I think we see two main phases. First is she's drawing more on traditional styles of music coming from, Black American tradition, more soul, funk, hip hop, etc. And she was trying to sing. Like, I don't think she's the
Yeah,
most powerful vocalist, but she was definitely singing. Then you have the, self-titled Beyonce album when she starts doing this like very edgy, more trap, more like sexual club stuff,
yeah,
where she's rapping now. She's not even singing.
yeah,
And it seems like this is her desperate attempt to try to remain relevant amongst younger audiences. And like she maintains the whole feminist girl power thing throughout her whole career, but I think it's become so affected that people don't really buy it anymore. Like we know Beyonce's gonna have a song about women, and it's gonna be like I think people are bored with this kind of moralistic, parade of social justice feminism. I don't know. It's like in music and art, like, okay, we want something more spicy, something more exciting. Um,
I think her music videos have been interesting in that they're like really artfully curated. I think she's an excellent curator. I
mhm.
do think that, yeah, I think I think her releases are events, but I do miss, yeah, I miss atmosphere and I miss like joy and color and camp. So yeah, I agree with you. It feels everything feels very driven and causal and often political, and
Mhm.
that can feel a little bit like I need someone to let the air out.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It makes me miss like the pop.
Yeah. That's fair. That makes sense. Okay, so back to Britney. Controversial question. What do you say to the kind of conspiracy theories that she's an MK Ultra victim, that she's being mind controlled? What do you make of that?
Can you explain what MK Ultra is?
MK Ultra is like basically this government or like I don't know, CIA invented this way of like I guess mind controlling victims with I don't know, some kind of
Right.
procedure. And I
Uh-huh.
mean, they say that a lot of like major record labels will use this on their most popular stars to kind of keep them under control. And the way you know that someone's a victim is that like there'll be certain symbols in their videos or in their photo shoots, but then they'll have big public breakdowns. And like
Mm,
the press will chalk it up to like, oh, mental health awareness. Britney's overwhelmed. She's bipolar. But the conspiracy theory is like, okay, she's under this mind control and she's like glitching now. And that's why she shaved her head and is stabbing the car with the umbrella. I
mm.
don't know. I see merit in it. I mean, I don't want to go on record like, saying it's all real, but I definitely think perhaps there's something. I think there are certain patterns with certain celebrities that are undeniable. I don't know.
There's something about her breakdown, though, that is also um, so large and explosive that it feels it's more dramatic, it's more cinematic. And if she is this mind control victim, like watching her rattle against the cage, and this is also just very much having her sexuality. Again, we're back in the archetypal realm of watching this
Mhm.
woman have her sexuality try to be caged up and watching her rattle at the cage.
Yeah.
That's always going to be more interesting to me than like I feel so bad saying this, but like, Demi Lovato recently came out as non-binary, and like my roommate and I just rolled our eyes, which I feel terrible saying that, but it's so just like, okay, good for you, girl. With Britney Spears, it was like she is in the fight of her life right now, and
Yeah.
I'm there with her. So I kind of love that, if we can bring the CIA into this, that makes it even bigger.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love it. I mean, with Janet Jackson, we saw it was way bigger than we thought it was, and I
Mhm.
embrace that. So,
Yeah, because like even if it's not this whole government plot, whatever, I have to say like I see this pattern with the pop stars having the public breakdowns. Like it definitely seems a lot of it seems planned. A lot of it seems like this
mhm.
big public display, this spectacle. Which again, like to me, it's funny when people do the whole hashtag mental health awareness thing. Because like sure, maybe they're all a little mentally ill, but like there must be more to these pop stars breaking down that they're like, oh, the industry's overwhelming. Like something's up with the way that they're handled, the way that they're, I don't know.
Yes. Those sorts of things too, you want to ask questions about like if these people are at the helm of these huge machines, these huge press machines, these
Mhm.
labels, like why is this sort of thing being released to us? Like, why are we seeing this as opposed to other things we never are supposed to see? Like, I think there are bigger questions to ask there too, which is like, someone knows this is happening and there is a profit there. So I agree with you about that.
Yeah. So I have a final question, much easier to answer. Which is your favorite Britney album?
Mm, blackout.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say. Blackout, then okay, then what's the second favorite?
Ooh, blackout. Let me just double check because I don't want to regret it.
Okay.
There's something about Blackout to me that also speaks to a certain kind of authenticity of the fandom.
Yes.
Oh yeah, In the Zone. In the Zone's my second favorite,
Really?
obviously.
Why?
Yeah, it was so exciting. We had Oh yeah, Me Against the Music, Toxic, Outrageous, Boom Boom. There was just this sense. I remember being like, this is a whole new era. It
Mhm.
felt like it was really tuned into the new century. Like it didn't feel like
Mhm.
a rehashing of 1999. It was like, oh shit, we're in a new century. It felt really, she really was singular at that point. I mean, there was just no one else like her doing that. And the videos too were just like really out of nowhere. What about you? What are your favorites?
Mine is Blackout because that was
Yeah.
I mean I think the production's fascinating because a lot of those songs were Danger Hands, who was a protege of Timbaland, who I think Timbaland is one of the greatest producers along with Missy Elliott of our time.
Hmm.
But
Agreed.
yeah, the production's fascinating because you have this mix of this like dirty club with a little bit of hip hop with like it's fascinating. But the themes also they're just fun. They're not conventional. In the
And
zone.
Blackout's kind of ridiculous too, because
Yeah.
Blackout, by the time she's making these club tracks, we know she's not going to any club. You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
is like post breakdown. So there is this kind of desperation that I think is really relatable, especially if you're like a closeted teen or something, of like, this album is pure fantasy. Like,
Yeah.
this is really about delusion, but in a beautiful way. So I love
I
that.
can
Sorry,
see
as you're saying.
that. Yeah. No, in the zone, I can't relate to. I mean, Toxic sure is a classic, but the rest of the songs, I never really got into it. I think
Hmm.
for me, it's Britney. I think it's the
Mm,
third album. Again, I'm very drawn to production, so a lot of that was Pharrell, Dark Child. I
right.
like that like early 2000s R&B hip hop sound.
Fuck, no, it's such a good album.
And it's interesting because Slave for You was originally for Janet and she turned it down.
Oof.
Yeah. I could hear Janet singing it. She could have been good.
I agree. Wow. But no, you're right. Britney is a really massive moment. I mean, it is
yeah.
new century and those music videos, it was like, okay, here we go. You know, the I'm a Slave for You music video, you just couldn't get away from it.
Yeah. And the themes, like, you know, the excitement of womanhood, of becoming a more of a like consciously becoming a sexual figure. But then like
Yes.
the doubts of like I'm not a girl, not yet a woman, like I'm in between. I don't really know if I'm mature enough yet to call myself a woman. Um,
You're right, and overprotected. You're right. There's a really beautiful duality there.
yeah. And again, I think
Wow.
the production embodies that tension, that kind of heat, that excitement that the earlier
Yes.
albums didn't. Like they were like, again, it was the girly aesthetic. It was like the sexy schoolgirl, but now it's like I'm a woman and it's exciting and it's dramatic and it's sexual tension, but it's also scary.
I agree, actually. You know, now that I'm reviewing, when you look at Baby One More Time or Oops, I Did It Again, they are so good. They are really riding out of the 90s. There is something about Britney that is like, oh shit, she's taking us beyond. That I could see if you were Mandy Moore or Christina Aguilera, I would have a panic attack if I
Yeah.
saw that album come out. So
Yep.
I agree with you.
Awesome. So before we go, David, anything you want to plug?
Oh, yes. So I have a column for Nylon, and I've written more for Iffy. All my pieces are at davidodyssey.com. And outside of that, I have a podcast, The Luminaries. If you go to my website, davidodyssey.com, you will discover all sorts of things. So I recommend it.
Awesome. Well, David, thank you for coming on.
This was a great pleasure for me. Thank you.
Uh,